You've been getting in touch with some of your questions and concerns around the enforcement of the rules, and pleased to say we're joined by Deputy Assistant Met Commissioner Matt Twist, who is the force's lead on COVID regulations, to help answer them. Thank you very much indeed for your time this evening. Before we get to the first one, can I just ask, because we know that we're hearing, that some of these rules are confusing for us. Are they confusing for your officers as well?
Oh, good evening, Riz, and thank you for having me on this evening. The rules have changed a number of times, but I think the essence of them is now really, really clear. Officers know what we need to do, and we are very much focused on the most serious, willful and deliberate breaches that are putting everybody in danger in what is a really perilous time in London. We've heard the reports. We know how far the virus is progressed in the capital and how serious the situation is. So now is a time for everybody not looking to stretch the boundaries or push the rules and do as much as they can. It's about really staying at home.
Okay, but you don't feel that any of your officers would be confused by them either?
So I think we've got really clear messages over what the current regulations are. And of course, some of the fine details of it, people would need to look up at the time. But the really core messages, the important stuff, is really clear, I think.
Okay. Well, people know that they should be staying at home, but we know that exercise is causing a bit of confusion, even the Prime Minister coming under scrutiny about it. Listen to this quick question from 89-year-old Jean about exercise.
I'm Jean Jackson. Can I take my dog out twice a day?
Matt Twist.
So thanks, Riz. I mean, the current regulations would say absolutely you can there's an exemption for taking animals for exercise. And actually, the law doesn't say whether or not that's once or twice a day. What we would say, though, is if you can do it once, then do that. That will be better than going out twice. But in regulation terms, then, no, you can take your dog for a walk twice a day if you want to.
OK, and in terms of how far you can travel for exercise, here's a question from Richard.
My question is, are we allowed to travel by car from Ealing to Kew in order to get some exercise in Kew Gardens? And so, thanks very much.
So for the benefit of the viewers, we think that's about 10 or 12 miles.
Yeah, thanks. So the law allows you to leave your home to do exercise in a public place, and it doesn't specify in the regulation how far you can or cannot travel to do that. But the guidance does touch on this, and it says that actually where we can, we would stay local, which would be in your village, your town, or in part of the city. So the law is very clear. Again, what I would ask for is common sense, and to do the minimum you possibly can in terms of travel. That's the right thing to do in terms of stopping the spread. And this is about not pushing the boundaries. It's about sort of sticking with the spirit of it as well as actually the letter of it.
OK, so just to clarify there, some of it is obviously guidance and some of it is obviously law. And in terms of staying local, that is guidance. And maybe that's where the confusion is coming in?
I think that's right. So the law allows you to leave the home to do exercise. The guidance describes on where that might best be done. And of course, the law is the only thing that's enforceable. The guidance, we're just asking people to recognise the seriousness of the situation and to do the right thing by that guidance.
Just very briefly, would you like more clarity on that from the government in terms of it? Because it's you and your officers having to interpret that.
So I think it's really clear. The law is clear, and it's only the regulations and the law that are a policing matter. Okay. And of course, as a society, we want people to comply with as much of it as they can. But the law is what the police will be dealing with. OK,
and on the note of travel, actually, we've got a question from Seamus who asks, I'm in London and I would like to attend the funeral of a close relative in Birmingham. I won't be using public transport and I will adhere to social distancing. Can I attend?
So the simple answer is yes. There is an exemption to leave home for the purposes of going to a funeral, and the regulations don't specify whether that should be a family member or a close friend or indeed anybody else. But what I would say to Seamus is it really essential that you travel to Birmingham? How important is this? Is there another way this could be done? Because in so doing, in doing extra mixing, in travelling longer distances, then we're putting others at risk of needing to go to more funerals, candidly.
Well, you probably touched on this next one then, because Zizi asks about support bubbles. She says, my support bubble lives in Northampton and we spend weekends visiting each other. I drive there and I'm not in contact with anyone else. Is this still allowed?
So it's legal in that the law touches on what a support bubble is, but not where that must be. So again, it sounds like Zizi's taking sensible precautions, not speaking to anybody else, not stopping on the way. Again, doing the minimum you can is the best we can do at the moment. But in what Zizi's outlined, then that would be absolutely legal, yes.
OK. Can I turn to a big issue for many people? We've heard today, haven't we, that some of the big supermarkets are saying they'll be tougher on shoppers not wearing masks unless medically exempt. But Sue asks, should supermarket staff wear masks if they're in a customer-facing role?
So the answer, Sue, is yes, they should actually. There's specific regulations on face coverings. What I would say, though, is that ceases to apply if there are screens or barriers that the supermarkets have put in place. And look, we know that most retailers, most big retailers, and actually most retailers in London are being really sensible about this. So either the staff are wearing face coverings or masks, or there are appropriate perspex screens or other physical barriers that are preventing them having sort of contact with the public.
And something that's also come into us, people are generally asking, are police challenging people who should be wearing masks but aren't? And I think that's because there has been some perception that perhaps it's not being enforced as much as it should be, and buses and tubes were also mentioned.
Yeah, so, and here's another difference between where there's guidance and where there's regulation. So on public transport, on buses, on the tubes, this is regulation, this is the law, you must do it. And our officers working with Transport for London and the British Transport Police are out there engaging with people and encouraging them to comply, but also issuing fixed penalty notices where they don't. In a public place, there may be areas where actually it's sensible to do so. And we've heard various senior clinicians and the chief medical officer talking about where it might be sensible to do this. But that's guidance, that's a matter of people's choice. So that's not a policing matter at this time.
OK, so many questions. We will have to leave it there. But Matt Twist, many thanks indeed for joining us this evening. We hope you'll join us again, because I think this will continue in the weeks ahead. Thank you very much. Well, as well as your questions, we're also keen to hear some of your stories about how the pandemic is affecting you. Please do keep them coming, whether it's the challenges you're facing or something positive and uplifting that will actually make us all feel better. You can get in touch on email or on our social media. As you can see, the details are on your screen.